Okay, so you're asked to start the video if you can do that now.
Okay, now.
Sorry for that.
Thank you, Professor Hearn. And it's a great honor for me to be here with you today. Good morning and good afternoon to all of our participants. Well, I heard very, very carefully the Vipul, the Professor Vipul presentation. So I thought that we are running the era of one N, uncertainty, and the two I and S, the insecurity and instability era. So today we will talk about the complex trauma and the types of war in the context of global uncertainty. And let me share, we will see what is the war, the trauma, and the global uncertainty, and how these are interrelated. So we will see what is war, different types of war, because we are not in the past that we also, we talked about traditional war and the combat and the battlefield. Now the battlefield will be everywhere. Okay, so we will discuss the different types of war and the trauma war related. The complex trauma and war, and how the types of war and in the context of uncertainty are related to the display of the complex trauma. So we will also address a very, very important dilemma about the global uncertainty context, which is either we adapt or we suffer. So, and finally, we will see the war trauma uncertainty analogy. So let's start. Well, you can see a fruit standing and sees the sun and a beautiful beach at South Billion. Well, but what about war and trauma and uncertainty? Are there interconnections? Are there interconnected? So what are interconnections is how the world communicates, power itself, and how interacts. So even we have technological networks, the human relationship, or global systems, we have to understand that all these are interconnected in a constant dialogue. So at this era, we are certainly interconnected. Let me say that because it's an incident that happened a month ago here in Greece. Some fishermen found a sea drone in a cave. They did not know what it's about. So when you just swim and you see there a drone, I mean a war, a weapon war, you start, okay, something that is happening certain miles away comes here also at this Ionian island. So it's very, very important to keep in mind that we are having this instability, insecurity, and of course, uncertainty context. So what is war? We all know that is an organized armed conflict between states, group, or communities that results, of course, in very, very crucial destruction, loss of life, and of course, social disruption. So we have certain characteristics. We have, of course, violence that is very pronounced. We have many political objectives. This also is observed in human suffering as well as social instability. And of course, we have economic consequences. And now we see that because we know that, as I told before, the interconnection, it's true that economic consequences, the human suffering, the instabilities are also pronounced in countries that they do not have an active war at the moment. So let's see the characteristics of war. We have an organized and prolonged conflict involving armed groups, the state or communities, as we said before. So we have many long-term social consequences, but also we have many short and long-term psychosocial consequences. Well, someone could say, okay, can we say that war and trauma? Because we know that trauma-informed care and all the studies that came up with trauma had to do with the veterans and during the traditional wars, okay, the World War I, all the World War II. So now we are heading a new perspective on the type of war and how we conceive that. So at the moment, we know that war affects physical safety. Okay, so this is very pronounced and very straightforward. However, we know also that emotional well-being has been affected, family structure and community functioning. And this, it is very, very important, is that war now, more than ever before, extends far beyond the battlefield. So the place that we have the battles. So the effects of war can last for generations and of course shape entire societies. And don't have in mind only the countries that now are on ongoing wars. We will see that in a few minutes. Well, as we said, we do not have only the traditional war, the interstate war, for instance, the conflict between the sovereign states, okay, which is a bit, we are familiar with that concept, as well as the civil war. And in some countries, the guerrilla war. We have also the proxy wars, and of course, ethnic and religious conflicts. We are all a bit confident about these concepts. We have known, and please say that, okay, we may have terrorism and asymmetric warfare, that also in some countries is something that we can see, and we have a lot of studies on these type of wars. So the seventh, as you can see, is the hybrid warfare. And of course, as a hybrid, we know that we have a combination of all types of war, or even new types of war. So a combination of a military, cyber, economic, and information tactics. It's not just to say that it's not many experts are talking about the new type of war has to do with attacks on digital infrastructure and have an asymmetric threats. We also see some types of ethnic and sectarian conflicts, and we know some examples of that, the Bosnian War or the Rwandan genocide. So now we see that modern warfare, well, it blurs a lot the line between the military and the civilian targets. So we have an increased psychological harm. And this is the point here about psychological harm. And let's see what is trauma. Well, we know that trauma is a reaction, an emotional reaction. So we have shock, denial as a typical responses to an event that preceded. But let me tell you here that is something that has to do, of course, with the perception of what happened. Okay, so it's very, very important to keep that in mind. So emotional reactions like flashbacks, mood swings, nervousness, mental and physical discomfort, or nightmares are included in the criteria of post-traumatic stress disorder, as we all here know. So we may say that an event like war, an accident, crime, a disaster in a natural context, a physical or emotional abuse, neglect, or experiencing or witnessing violence, and just keep that because we will see how it's interconnected with uncertainty, the death of a loved one and others can be an event that could be perceived as traumatic. So it's a psychological response. And here comes the perception of the event, the threat, the overwhelm, and the harm. So keep in mind that trauma is not something that happens outside, but what happens inside. We have common reactions like fear, shock, anxiety, and very high levels of emotional distress. And of course, keep in mind that trauma could be acute, chronic, and complex. And now we're going really to our points. So we have a psychological response that overwhelms the capacity, the ability of a person to cope. We may have a combat exposure, a torture, a sexual violence, or a loss of loved ones, and we have these common reactions. Now let's keep something that not everyone responds to trauma the same way. So we have to keep in mind that responses vary according to the support systems available, previous experiences, and aids. So we see here a bit of war-related trauma, and I won't stay here very long, but we know that we have key breakdowns of psychosocial repercussions of war, like a breakdown of social trust, forced migration, instability. And then we start with the hard aspects like chronic fear, betrayal trauma, and community fragmentation. We see that these are consequences of a civil war, as we can see here. But we know that the modern forms of warfare has certain characteristics that are not very well studied at the moment because it's something that is ongoing. So we talk today, but there at the moment certain wars that are ongoing. So we are in parallel at the moment. So we have unpredictable attacks. We have a constant uncertainty, and we have terrorism. We have psychological intimidation, and very much and high in the agenda is the economic pressure. So let's see the toll that is very heavy here. But we have a persistent uncertainty and hypervigilance and collective anxiety. So let's see what is complex trauma. Complex trauma has certain different characteristics of post-traumatic stress disorder. Of course, we refer to this disorder having in mind that we have multiple traumatic events, we have an ongoing exposure on them, and difficulty escaping danger. So the threat is not over. It comes over and over again. And why war causes a complex trauma? Because we have continuous violence, repeated losses, many times ongoing displacement, and of course, prolonged uncertainty. So here we have to know that most victims of the modern wars are civilians rather than military personnel. And we know that. You can see here some of the combat trauma, the types of trauma, and the war has affected specific populations like the combat trauma, the soldiers, or the civilian trauma. And you see the civilian trauma, for instance, that we have non-combatants or soldiers, and we see communities under attack. meaning chronic anxiety, grief, hopelessness, and social withdrawal. These mix uh, of these experiences are very, very crucial to social cohesion. And this is the very, very important thing here. We also see the refugee trauma and how they have the forced migration and the displacement, as well as the developmental one from exposed and experienced by children witnessing violence. And of course, in the context of the children that expose this conflict, we see attachment difficulties, developmental delays, increased risk of mental illness, and of course, many behavioral challenges. And here you can see how complex trauma, and especially the trauma at the refugees population, we have three different stages: the before flight stage, the during flight, and the after arrival on the place that they migrate. So also we have serious consequences like anxiety disorders, depression, and identity challenges. We have very certain studies about the refugee trauma, which are very, very important to countries that are actively engaged in welcoming refugees from war areas. Of course, we have sexual violence, and you see that the impact of the sexual violence is on all aspects: physical, psychological, and the social one. And we have also the intergenerational trauma and how this passed one generation through the other. We see some examples of intergenerational trauma, like the Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide. And we have something to say that complex trauma is a bit different from post-traumatic stress disorder. We say that this includes more self-erosion components. And this is not very straightforward. I mean, we develop feeling of worthlessness, shame, and guilt. We face problems controlling emotions. So we have a destabilization of emotions processing. We have a very, very important difficulty to function and to connect with other people. Even we have very high levels of suspiciousness, for instance. And of course, as we see there, we have also relationship problems, like we are not very, it's not very easy for us to maintain friends and partners. So it's more likely to develop complex trauma at a young age. When you traumatize from a trusted person, or you have the inability, you are not able to escape trauma. Let me hear you say that we have a large estimation of prevalence of complex trauma. In this place, we have some studies reporting 5 to over 80%. So we have a very wide range here. And we see that we have the key components that we saw before. And of course, the 2023 study from Cardiff and others was very, very precise in assessing the ongoing war in Ukraine, in Ukrainian parents, and found that PTSD was, complex PTSD was 14.6% the population, and PTSD was at the found on the 26% of the population. So it's very, very important to keep that in mind. We do not have many studies for the complex trauma. It's something that we are hitting now and we are facing. So let's see that uncertainty, what is, and we know all here, but is an affective and cognitive state. So we do not have all the information, we do not have all the pieces of clarifications, and we see that in the context of complex trauma, uncertainty is a primary nervous system trigger, like even in very simple tasks after complex trauma. So we have established an unpredictable and threatening environment, and then the brain learns to process unknown as a threat. So this is something that has to do with perception. It's very, very important to understand this link. So here, uncertainty is a certainty. So we all agree on that. In the here and now, however, we have extreme levels of uncertainty. I think that we are hitting at the present global momentum the highest levels from the history of humanity. So we do not know if we are so equipped to handle psycho-emotional these type and these levels of uncertainty, because something has happened several miles away, and we may affect it globally. And the global component of uncertainty is really an unknown path for us, also mental health professionals, because we are also part of the globe, and we are part of the population, and we are a part of our societies. So we develop, when it's very, very important, and we see that clinically every day, we have developed an uncertainty hypervigilance, and what we can say an uncertainty distress. So many people says that, okay, uncertainty, and the psychosocial one, is like the death of control, or an open door, a wide open door to threat. And this came here as people's presentation of the neurobiology of trauma. We have the survival mode constantly on. We are on helicopter mode, locating danger and threat. You you hear, you're on the train, and you hear a high voice, and you startle, you say, okay, what happened? Is something that happened bad? Well, and this is very, very characteristic of the survival mode that is constantly on wherever we are now. So we have an ongoing activation of the alarm system. And this, of course, has an impact on biochemistry, our body functions, and psycho-emotional functions as well. So many patients report that, okay, it's like I'm in a battlefield. I'm in a constant battlefield. Even we do not have an active war here, for instance. We certainly every day face that. And now it's a high-end psychosocial dilemma. Like, okay, we are in a crucial crossroad here. Adapt, become resilient, or suffer the uncertainty and the complex interconnections and the constant survival mode. Okay, this is the key message here, that psychological adaptation does not exclude any discomfort. Of course, is essential, and is essential to widen our window of uncertainty, how we handle it. So what can we add here as mental health professionals, and our everyday practice could be high levels of self-compassion and existential compassion, because as Professor Whipple told before, we have to raise the sense of belonging. We have to create a strong psychosocial bonds in order to adapt to this ever-changing global uncertainty context. And of course, very, very important is that we need to incorporate in our interventions locus of control, since internalize this locus. We do not have in certain a great now range of control in outside of us. So many activities or daily routines are dependent on our internal locus of control. So it is very important to incorporate that in every intervention, managing either trauma or the constant survival mode about what happened, or that people are constantly alert for anything could go wrong. And it's not the typical population or the typical prevalence that we know we have about the general anxiety disorder or the anxiety disorders. It's something more wide and general population, targeting general population. So here, it's very, very important to keep that in mind, that we have this analogy. So as war evolves, far from the traditional type, and has an hybrid presentation, complex trauma might be escalated because we have various trauma channels. I mean, economic, cyber attack, instability, insecurity. We have many places that perception of threat could lead in. So, of course, we have the prolonged uncertainty, which also keeps the door open to any perception of threat, because uncertainty is associated with threat in our human brain. So let's see that in this bigger picture. So, of course, it affects psychosocial processing and well-being. So we can say that multiple layers of human processing and perception are, in quotation marks, infected by war and high-level uncertainty. And keep in mind that we do not talk about traditional battle and exposure and violence. Violence could be even extreme uncertainty, or the possibility that something will go certainly wrong when I am on the train and going to my work. So it's very, very important to keep in mind that individuals and subjective assessment of threat, the perception in other words, are more important than the severity of objective trauma. This is very, very important to keep in mind, that it's a matter of perception in terms of trauma. So we cannot see, we see that brain is in the middle of the traumatic event. It's not outside, trying to battle, to find a point to escape, to adapt. Is a very, very hard work here. So I am closing this talk with a, I think, great picture of a Greek summer, someone in Seriphos Island, Cyclades. And let's hope that this could raise awareness to us mental health professionals. And of course, thank you. Thank you so much for your attention.